What is a multi-cloud deployment model, and is it better? Is it something that you should do? That's what I want to talk about today. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney, and for the last 20 years, I've drafted and negotiated a variety of technology-related agreements and litigated failed digital transformations in courts across the country. So what is a multi-cloud environment or a multi-cloud deployment model? And when I'm talking about a multi-cloud deployment model or environment, so instead of utilizing functionality from one provider, instead of being an Oracle shop or an SAP shop, you're really selecting what I would say, are best of breed functionalities from a variety of different types of vendors. You're looking at WMS functionality, you're looking at CRM functionality, whatever it is, you're picking and choosing the type of functionality that better suits your company for whatever reason that might be. And I think really, there are advantages and disadvantages to that approach. I think, when you are selecting, multiple different providers as part of your digital ecosystem, really what you're doing is you're increasing the complexity of not only the implementation project, and the reason for that really is, look, all of these different vendors need to be compatible, they need to cooperate with each other, they need to coordinate, and they may not necessarily want to do that. They may not all play nice together. And so I think that increases, the complexity of the implementation process in and of itself. And, we already know that these types of projects fail at an incredibly high rate, anywhere from 75 to 85%. So, here you're increasing the complexity of that process, but you're also increasing the complexity of managing that environment for the life cycle of those particular products. So, the life cycle of an ERP system is anywhere from 10 to 15 years, maybe 20 years, depending on the company, depending on, the type of technology that's being deployed. And so, over the life cycle of your utilization of these pieces of technology, you're creating a more complex system that you are going to have to manage. And part and parcel to that is you're going to have sophisticated staff in-house that really have an understanding of how these pieces of software integrate, how they can talk to each other. You've got to have the right technical staff on hand to be able to make all of this work. So the question is, why would you do this? And I think, it's rare that one technology is going to solve all your problems. There's no silver bullet. There is, really no software functionality that's going to be totally out of the box, designed for your industry in a one-size-fits-all proposition. And I think, utilizing best of breed can certainly make sense. There's an argument, and I think there's some truth to this, that it really tends to mitigate issues associated with vendor lock-in, meaning that it becomes easier to transition to a new vendor because you're not, your eggs are not all in one basket. You've got greater flexibility to change the key components of your system without the need to migrate to an entirely new provider. So I think that's certainly a benefit. I think there's some truth to the fact that you might have a better ability to negotiate better pricing with these individual vendors than you might with a big behemoth like SAP or Oracle or Infor. And I think you also, to some extent, you can hedge against technological obsolescence. You've got best of breed, and that is going to carry you, maybe many more years than a mediocre software solution from one of the big providers. So there are pros and cons to this. What's my view as an attorney that litigates in this space, negotiates these kinds of contracts? Well, here's what I can tell you. If I'm going to have a dispute with a software vendor, my preference is to be able to look to one vendor and assign responsibility for the entire failure to that vendor. What becomes incredibly complex and messy is when you have, multiple fingers in that pie. You're trying to go after one vendor because there's a failure with their functionality, but that failure, they're going to say, is not only dependent on you and your failures, but it's going to be dependent on another vendor and their inability to fully integrate or cooperate with them. So it becomes an incredibly challenging scenario from a litigation standpoint. you increase the cost of litigation, you increase the complexity, you increase potentially the duration of the litigation. You've got multiple defendants, and you're really trying to figure out what the lay of the land is from a factual standpoint, and that can create substantive difficulties for the litigation, for the lawsuit, and for ultimately the resolution of that lawsuit in some sort of a settlement. You're settling with multiple parties. You've got different terms and conditions upon which you're settling with, different monetary amounts. All of that becomes incredibly complicated. So from a purely selfish legal perspective, my vote is to have one vendor, one throat to choke, as they say, one person to look to for responsibility. I think it just makes the process easier if things go sideways. If you have any questions about anything I've talked about in this video, please feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you, get an understanding of what difficulties you're facing, and point you to a way forward.